Hi everyone! Welcome to the Pattern Niche YouTube channel, the best place for everything sewing. My name is Jo, and today I'm going to show you a super easy method to sew a V neckline. Please take a second to click on the subscribe button and let's dive in. This is my neckband, and I like to make things a little bit easier, so I mark the stitch line. The seam allowance for this is 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter. So I'm going to align my ruler on the edge and mark at 1 centimeter. This is a friction pen, by the way, so it's going to disappear once I apply some heat. So this point right here, where the seam lines intersect, is where I'm going to have to pivot when I'm sewing so that I get a nice V point. Next I have my front piece. This is my front piece, and what I like to do is stabilize the V point here with a bit of interfacing. So I have a square here. It's a lot larger than I need, and what I like to do is have it the same shape as the neckline. So I'm going to put it behind and just mark. I'm going to take a ruler so that it's easier. So now I'm going to cut on the line I just drew, and this is going to be a perfect match for the neckline. And this bit we can just cut away. You need to place the interfacing a bit lower than where your stitch line is. Just a bit, not at all. So I'm going to go fuse this and then I'll be right back. So I've fused my interfacing and now we're going to cut the extra away. Be careful to only cut the interfacing and not your whatever it is you're sewing. Okay. Now, the same as with the neckband, I like to mark the stitch line. So I'm at the sewing machine now. You do want to sew the neckband and the V-point on the sewing machine. While it might work on the serger, it does save you a bit of time, but the results really aren't the same. So you should sew the V neckband and the V-point on the sewing machine. So I just have a straight stitch. You don't need a stretch stitch for this because it's a very small area and it's not gonna really stretch. When you get close to the V point, you can just decrease your stitch length. I'm going to set mine to 1.5 so that it's easier to get exactly on the V point. When you get close, you can just use the wheel and turn it with your hand, so that you get really where you should. Okay, when you get here, stop with your needle down, raise your presser foot, pivot, and continue sewing. Don't forget to change your stitch length back to normal. I always forget. Okay, so let's see what we did. Okay, looks great. I'm gonna go press this and then I'll be right back. So I've pressed my neckband and now we're gonna do some cutting so it lays better. Cut almost to the stitching but not through it. As you can see here. Turn it over. And then cut the seam allowance because this bit here we don't really need. And this one, well, I cut it a little wonky, but it's gonna be fine. So what we need to do now is decide which part we're going to have on the outside. Okay, so I guess this goes all right. And let's see this part. Yeah, I like it better like this. So since I want this part here to be visible, we'll have to stitch it like this. So what you need to do is align the V-point, the stitching V-point on the top, on the front, with the one on the neckband. So what I'm gonna do is mark the V-point by inserting a pin on the wrong side where I already marked it, and adding a mark on the front. This is kind of hard to see, so I'm going to use a blue friction pen. Okay. Okay, here it is. I'm also going to make a mark from the top to the stitching point, but on the back, so that I know where to cut later and I don't have to do any guesswork. Okay. Now we need to mark the V-point on the neckband. So I'm going to take my ruler, and I don't really need to mark all the seam allowance because this is the point that I want to align. So I'm going to mark here. What we're going to do next is align this point to this point. So you place it together like this. Place a pin here. Okay. And then place it through this point like this. Okay, next you're going to pick one side. I'm going to go with the left side and just align your neckband to the neckline for, I don't know, an inch and a half. Doesn't have to be too long. So I'm going to place a pin here and a pin here. The reason we place these pins here and here is to make sure this doesn't move when we sew it. Okay, and then we can remove this point. I like to put another pin here just to make sure. Okay, and now we can remove this pin here and hope things don't move. Next, we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew this bit, starting from this point here to here. So we're back at the sewing machine. I'm just going to remove these pins and place them the other way around because it's kind of tricky to sew with them underneath. Just make sure the neckband and the neckline are still aligned. Just to be sure, I'm gonna place again a pin here so that things don't move while I move this. Actually, I'm not even gonna move this pin since it's behind where I'm going to start sewing. Okay, I'm gonna make sure everything is out of the way here. And we're going to start sewing. Check again. Okay. So I will align my needle with the V-point on the neckline. I'm just going to lift this presser foot a bit. Okay, I hope you can see. And I'm going to slowly get the needle down. Okay, perfect. So now I'm going to lower the presser foot and the needle. Okay. I'm going to raise the presser foot a little bit so that I can align the stitch line here. Okay. I'll shorten my stitch length quite a lot because this is a place where we're not going to backstitch starting from the beginning and we really need that seam to be secure. So I'm going to go somewhere around 1.1, 1.2. Okay, now we're going to start sewing. Now we can backstitch. And now you can change your stitch length back to normal. I use 2.3 millimeters. Be careful when you're sewing over needles. I don't do this often, but when I do V necklines, I really like to have the extra security the pins provide. Just go very slow, it should be fine. Okay, you can backstitch here if you want. I don't usually, but let's do it now. So here's where we're at. We can also remove this pin. Okay, next step, you're going to take a scissor and you're going to cut starting from here up until here. The closer you get, the better the result, but also if you miss this point and go a bit over, you're kind of not left with many solutions. So just go safer, go a bit lower if you don't have enough control, so that you don't go over and have to fix stuff after. Okay, so I have my scissors here. Just make sure to get the neckband out of the way so you don't cut through that. I'm gonna hold it here with my finger, as you can see. If you feel you're cutting through some extra material, stop, because you probably are. Okay, so we're close, not too close, but this should be fine. So next step, you take this part, okay, and you align it like this. You will have some extra here. See how this puckers? You just do this. You fold it. Okay, sorry, I don't think you saw that. So you have this extra fabric here that you don't necessarily know what to do with. What you do is fold it out of the way. Okay, so you do it like this. Okay, I think you can see better here. See, all the extra fabric goes here. You align this bit to the neckline, and the extra fabric goes to the side. And when you start from this point again. So I'm going to put some pins here, and then we're going to stitch the rest. So I put some pins here. I've aligned my neckband to the neckline. I've folded this extra bit here. Now you can actually see why we put the interfacing here, because if we wouldn't have, this would stretch. It would be very hard to go on the same point if it stretches. So same as before, lift presser foot a bit, lower the needle slowly while holding your thread, not like me. Okay. Okay, so I think I'm right on the same point. Should be. Okay, lower the presser foot, lower the needle completely. Well, that worked well. Mistakes happen to everyone. You just have to be patient and fix them. And now I'm going to slowly lower my needle by hand. Don't forget to lower your stitch length. It's actually better to do this before you start, before you place the needle in your fabric, but I forgot. Okay, I'm gonna go with the first stitch by hand. Okay. I'm going to back stitch a bit. Okay. Change my stitch length back to 2.3. Okay. So let's see the result. So I am a perfectionist and it's very hard to let things go, but since there are no puckers here and this is almost to the middle, I'm just gonna leave it as is because, well, perfect is the enemy of done, and I have a lot of projects I haven't really finished because there's like this very small error, but as it is, I'm pretty pleased with it, so I'm just gonna leave it like this. Next, I'm gonna show you how to sew the rest of the neckband on the serger. You're not going to remove all the seam allowance here and get right on the stitch line with the serger. We're gonna go from here, just not cut anything and leave almost all of this here so that we won't ruin the V here. If you find this video useful, click on the like and subscribe button and join the family. Before we go to the serger and start sewing the neckband to the neckline, we're gonna have to quarter our neckline and our neckband. It's of course a lot easier if you do this before starting to sew, but as always, I forgot. So I'm gonna fold the neckband in half first. And I know some people use pins, just like to make a snip because I'm always removing pins and forgetting why they were there. Okay, then I'm gonna put this snip here together with the V. Okay, and make a snip here. Be careful to make a small snip because you don't want this to be out of your seam allowance. Then the other side. This is why it's really helpful if you press first, because it folds nicely and it's easy to see where the middle is. Okay, same thing with the neckline. Next, we're going to find the center back by placing the shoulder seams together. And then we're going to place the center back and center front together and find the middle. As you can see, the shoulder point is not the middle, and it rarely is. So please don't use the shoulder as a reference point unless you measured and you know that it coincides. And now we're gonna align the notches on the neckband with the ones on the neckline. I like to place a couple of extra clips because it really helps me stretch evenly when sewing. Okay, now let's go sew this up. Now we're gonna serge the neckband to the neckline. So we're gonna start from the V-point. You're going to make sure the extra fabric is folded out of the way, like so. And we're gonna start sewing with the neckline up and the neckband on the bottom. This is because it's easier to see if the neckline is stretched out when you pull it, if the neckline is on top, as opposed to if the neckband is on top. So let's start sewing. This edge here is my guide for 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to start a bit on the left of the guide so that I don't accidentally stitch more than I've actually stitched here and ruin my V. When I'm past that point, I'm gonna adjust slowly and trim all the seam allowance that I have to. Just go slow, adjust if you have to. There's really no need to rush. So you see, here's a pucker forming. I'm gonna lift the presser foot, adjust the fabric a little bit, and continue. Now, when you get to the end, you're gonna sew straight for a bit, and then slightly move to the left. So this is what you should have. Here's our original stitching line, and here's the serger line. Okay, let's turn it the other way and see what we've got. So here's our neckband all sewn up. I'm gonna go press this and show you the result. So I went and pressed my neckline, and as you can see, there are a little bit of not puckers but creases here. This is because this is a modified New Orleans tee, and I widened the neckline a little bit in the back, and I forgot to adjust the neckband, so yeah, this is the result. But it's gonna be okay on the body. I'm not worried too much about this. This is how our V neckline looks. This is a little bit off center, but I'm gonna go with that's fine. Nobody's gonna notice. I've seen worse on ready to wear, so this is fine. I really hope you enjoyed this and that you're going to give this method a try. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.